welcome to the next episode of the Tru-Turf Super Series. I hope wherever you are in the world, things are going well as seasons change in the northern and the southern hemispheres. Gives me a great pleasure to introduce John Reilly, who's the Director of Agronomy for the Longboat Key Club in Florida. John, welcome along to this episode of the Tru-Turf Super Series.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. I'm going to call you Super Nick since we're here in the Super Series. So.
Excellent. I didn't bring my cape today, but I'll make sure I have one for the next episode. Well, speaking of super, you're the Director of Agronomy at the Longboat Key Club. Tell us about your journey in turf.
Well, I come from a golf family or golf loving family, and most of my father and my brothers, when I was growing up, were caddies, and I did that as well. And I didn't have the greatest connection to authority. So when I would look around the golf course, especially when I was a young kid breaking in, they didn't have ball pickers. So you got a bag and a helmet, and these guys would fire hosel rockets at you. And I would see these gentlemen in the out there and the freewheeling it on a machine. And so when I got old enough, I talked to a good friend of mine who I talked to yesterday, who's a kind of a giant in the industry, Armin Stooney, who's a big headhunter in the States here for general managers and superintendents at usually high-end places. And Armin was a young man who was a superintendent, and I talked him into getting on the crew. And I worked as a crew member through the end of, I was 13, so I probably wasn't allowed to work, but through high school, college, graduate school, and whenever I had a whole different career. And when I had that career, I always had a part-time job so I could play golf. And it was usually walk mowing greens or bunkers. So daily maintenance was something that was sort of my sled into the business, and I always loved it. But in my family, we were a blue-collar family, and all of us went to college. And then, like I said, I had a master's degree in psychology, and so it wasn't something that was expected of me to go into school for mowing grass, which was kind of a misnomer, but that's sort of where it came from in my family. So I had a break in my life where I got divorced, and I sort of rethought things, and I went right back to being a maintenance guy in Florida, a little bit north of here, but on the West Coast. And I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't the grass is greener on the other side. And then my brother-in-law is a golf course superintendent as well. And he owes me his whole life because I introduced him to my sister. So he got his first soup job, and I went to work with him. I just went through the natural progression of being a golf course superintendent just a little later in life. And at one point, I tried being a general manager for a management company that we worked for. And I kind of always gravitated as a caddy, always gravitated as a GM to the turf side. It's just something that I love to do. And so I went to Rutgers for turf school a little bit later in life. And my first job out of turf school, I was very fortunate to intern at a really good place in Naples, Florida, for Darren Davis, who used to be the president of the Golf Course Superintendents Association. And then right out of the box, I had a job at a tour course called Innisbrook, which is a resort also on the west coast of Florida here. And my course was Copperhead, which is just a great golf course. And
absolutely.
It's a great test on the tour. It always holds up to par. When I was starting there, we had an event where there were men and ladies played together. It was called the J.C. Penney Classic, and then it transitioned into a tour stop, which is now kind of in the Florida swing. And that's when I got my first chance to sort of work on renovation, and that became my true love. And at that point in the turn of the century, which is kind of crazy to say, but in Florida was exploding with golf development. So for 10 years, I went to the center of the state, around the Orlando area, and I built a lot of golf courses. And the last course that I built was a course with Core and Crenshaw. So it was this reintroduction to where I came from, which was outside of the Philadelphia area, where there was so many great golf courses and so much architecture. And so it the game and the industry and everything sort of took me full circle. And unfortunately, at that time, that course didn't. There was a housing disruption in 2006, and the course eventually closed. But I was fortunate enough to get here to Longboat Key, and they needed a lot of help in the renovation area, and they were changing to this kind of niche grass called Paspalum, and I got a chance to do that over 45 holes, and it's been a really great experience. I didn't want any part of it. I really came here thinking that I could handle do we call it the cooch in Australia?
Cooch grass, yeah, the Bermuda,
Yes.
yeah, cooch grass is what we call it here in Australia, yeah.
Yeah, so I had two guys that I worked with from Australia that were through the Ohio State program when I was at Innisbrook. So we had a good old time renovating. We were one of the first clubs in that area to go to Tiff Eagle when we were in Copperhead. So we came here, and I felt like a really good Bermuda grass grower, and I thought that this course was built in Bermuda grass. So, but this is a special place, and the amount of salts that we have, it didn't always make it through, or the turf wasn't always in good shape. And so it's a beautiful place. It has high expectations. So Paspalum became the grass, and it took a little bit of time because a lot of my mistakes early on were using my Bermuda grass background, and it's just a whole different language. And so on this 13-year ride, we're fully platinum Paspalum, and one of the things that I always kind of hung my hat on were fast greens and well-performing greens. So that was one thing that was always against Paspalum grass, that it was kind of sticky and slow and bumpy. And so it took a little bit of time, and that's my little journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, that sounds like a great journey. And it's really interesting, I suppose, you touch on that psychology degree that you had originally. Probably plays some good points in play for team management and all those other things that you've got to do as part of your job as well. It's not only just managing the grass, but it's managing the people that you've got on your team as well. Right.
Sometimes that's definitely the bigger part of the mix, and I know everybody that's listening to this knows that as well. Having a psychology degree doesn't necessarily make you better at that, but it sort of makes you have a little insight here and there, and it was just something that kind of came naturally to me. So I do love the fact that I have a good relationship wherever I've been with the people that I've worked for. So I do thank my background and my education and my family for those types of just tendencies that I have. It comes naturally for me.
Yeah, that's nice. So the Longboat Key Club, tell us a little bit about it. You touched on it. There's I think 45 holes there at the course, member facility, and as you say, it's located right next to the ocean. So there's a lot of prevailing conditions, I'm sure, that are coming into play.
It's so beautiful, this place. It's west of Sarasota, so it's sort of mid Florida. It's not necessarily as south as what people know as the Keys from outside, but it's a island that's west of a city, so it's a key to the state, and it's just a fabulous place, and it has a resort component. So it was good for me coming from the Innisbrook days, but it's mainly a private club, especially when it comes to golf. About 8% of our play comes from staying at the resort, so 92% of our play comes from membership play, and it's been really great ride for me. I've seen the place was, it wasn't a place people wanted to come and work. It was a place where guys like me ended up going into sales or something along those lines, because the salts and the conditions were very, very trying. So I'm fortunate to have crossed that bridge and to have the right turf type. And right now, it's as good as it gets. And it's a course. There's 27 hole facility that sits on the Sarasota Bay or Sarah Bay, and then 18 holes that sit on the Gulf of Mexico. And there's just a 2-lane road in between, and you get to see the golf course from the road. I love that. It's not hidden. It's not behind a gate. It's right there, and it's kind of the logo for the town. Even if you're not a member, as the course goes, so does the town, and the town is probably at a height which I would have never expected. But what we've gone through in the last couple of years has been interesting, staggering, but it's been a wonderful sort of burst and boost for golf. And if I told you what they were getting in a membership, it's staggering,
Right.
So it's amazing. It's amazing that exists, and there doesn't seem to be like, we need to pump the brakes or we need to worry about it. People just want to play golf, and they're retiring in droves, and they're coming down here to Florida, and we're happy to have them. We have a great membership, a lot of good players, and it's everything you'd want and kind of think about if you were going to draw it up. So it's neat because when I came, it wasn't like that,
Well, that's obviously a reflection on what you and the team have done to lift the course and go through the changes. And it is a wonderful time in golf around the world at the moment where people are out playing in their droves, and long may that continue.
Yes, I'm in.
Yeah, good. When I was doing a bit of research on you the other day, I came across a comment from you, which I suppose is obviously very, very key to your philosophies. But plant health is the first box you check when you're looking at the health and maintenance of your golf course. Can you just talk us through a little bit of that, please?
Yeah, I came from a sort of time where you sort of pushed turf to the edge, and you lived on that, like, this precipice of doom and greatness. And that's where you wanted it all the time, or you weren't good. Or when things were really good, that's when you beat it up. That's when you put a hole in it. That's when you pull the core. And then I get this grass, and it's sort of counterintuitive. I start to rip it up. I start to aerify it. I start to verticut it hard, and it doesn't respond that well to it. And so I'm trying to get to another place, and I don't know exactly sort of where the light went off, but it just became this thing where the more healthy we were on top. And really, when I went to Rutgers, my specialty was soil science, and I was always chasing the most balanced soil, the base saturation correctly, everything in solution the way it was. And especially with this grass, it didn't necessarily translate to good, healthy turf. Good, healthy turf really what came from doing less equals more. And I had to find better ways of doing that. And it's really gone full circle. Like, I was not a stimp meter guy. And today we roll 5 greens. We have basically 5 9s. So in the morning, which is very unusual for anyone who does what we do, we roll a section that we always know will give us a good, easy, legitimate stimp in both directions. And then we make a decision on what we're going to do that day based on the rounds. And here it is 45 holes. It's mostly member play. So there's a sort of unique matriculation between where people will play. Today was Ladies' Day, and it was at Harborside, which is the 27-hole course, but also there was some play on the 18-hole course from the 9-hole ladies. So we have standards that we've developed over time, and using the metrics that we use on a daily basis. And even when you think about all of that stuff, it's really just the fact that we do it. And then after we make that decision, we're always checking moisture, and we're always checking firmness. And so this thing that happened, and I was in this place where I wasn't 100% all in. I just get me to summer, let me tear the place up, and let me put it back like I used to do it in the old days. And it just was a square peg in a round hole with the grass that I have. And I went to this. There's a magazine in the States called Golfdom, and they have this gathering, and I didn't really understand what it was, but it's kind of like buying a condo. Like, they invite superintendents to this resort, which was in Florida, so it wasn't a big trip for me. But then you go around and you meet all these vendors, and that was good for me, because this is a tough place to meet vendors, because we're on an island, we're sort of separate from everyone. But in the morning, there was Dr. Nikolai from Michigan State was giving a talk on rolling, and I mean, I put the eggs and the bacon on my thing. It was the night before, and it was an early morning, and I started hearing what he was saying and how people were skipping mows and rolling, and it was just enough information for me to be dangerous. And then you fast forward to today, and it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We haven't mowed a green yet, and we're in the 13s and the 14s on the stem, which with Paspalum maybe means 11 or 12 on the normal feel. Like, we don't even put that number on the sign or in the information sheet. It's purely for agronomics. When I used to say it's not an agronomic tool, the snip meter, it'd be behind the door or kept the door open if you wanted a breeze. I never really used it. So now it's part of that. The moisture meter is part of that. The firmness meters, and all of these things are important for us to do on a daily basis. But just the act of doing them has made it better for us. So, in a long, kind of arduous explanation, we are healthy on the top, basically what we get paid for, and that has allowed us to perform better, which, from the generation that I came from, that wasn't necessarily the way we were taught. It was lean them out, keep them dry. And so I don't even worry about moisture content. I worry about moisture uniformity. I don't worry about whether I'm as firm as the guy down the street or the guy with Tiff Eagle. I worry about firmness uniformity, because if I'm using those two things, then I've seen the results that we're healthy on top. And we used to, with this grass, we used to mow it really low.
Yeah.
Because it's a dense grass. If you look at it through a macroscope or something along those lines, it looks like a forest. And you've mowed this thing, the width of a dime, and you're thinking, how am I doing this? And the leaves and whatnot are all moving around, and you're thinking, this can't be good for golf and roll and playability. And now we're as high as we've ever been. We mow, we skip hundreds of mows a year. And, the roller is our friend. When I was a kid coming up, the roller was what created compaction. It's the reason we had to aerify 4 times a year. It's the reason we had to tear them up. And the more I do this, the more I find out, a lot of things that I thought or what I learned, they don't translate here. I'm not saying that's everybody, but I do believe that. I do believe that if you work on that box, like you said, if you work on whatever your definition of plant health is first, and I think your success rate goes up exponentially in our business.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's something we're hearing around the world around the practices of mowing less, increasing leaf height or leaf length, making it a more healthy leaf means it's going to be more sustainable. But certainly, one of our other guests on a recent episode of the Super Series, Paul Larson at Royal St George's, once again, a different grass type, but he's reached his nirvana recently of leaf length and leaf height to speed, which is exactly what you're doing, a different grass type in a different location in the world.
And I think I listened to that, and he mentioned Nikolai as well. So. This is something that you don't necessarily hear often, and I wouldn't have never sought it out. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of our business. It's really interesting, and people will call and check, and it's just a little unusual, especially I'm a director of agronomy. There's golf course superintendents, and it's our life to be thinking about what we're going to do next. So guys that work for me have to have no thought of that. They don't. We kind of know, but when we were putting this together, you had no plan. If you were my mechanic, you didn't know if the reels had to be ready, if they had to be,
Yep.
and now we have tons and tons of data, and we can get from point A to point B a lot quicker. But we still do all of that stuff on a daily basis, and it's pretty fascinating to me. It's something that sometimes my brethren around here will be like, "Oh no, here he goes again. He's going to start talking about." But it's slowly but surely. I see a lot more people doing what Paul was doing, and I think you'll see that more and more often as we try to reduce our footprint, but still give everybody a great surface to play on. And some of that comes from reimagining, re-explaining what the experience needs to be. It's our point. It's important for us to have, kind of control the narrative a little bit as well.
That's right.
And that's great. It's been good here. It's good fun. We do a Freaky Friday 15 stimp party on every Friday. There's a member game. And so some of the guys come down and we get them to show them the stimp meter and make a bit of fun out of it, and it's all in good fun, and it allows my guys that may be Spanish speaking guys to interact with the members, which they don't always get a chance to do, and so I've seen a lot of good come of this, really a lot of good.
Yeah, no, it sounds very interesting. As you say, data is key these days, and it's helping not only make you make informed decisions, but I suppose also for you to be able to provide that information to committees or owners or whatever the case may be around the course, but also sharing that information amongst peers in the industry as well helps just to get that better education and understanding of what's going on out there, and where people can then pick up new practices to improve their own facility.
Right, and it's moved into approaches, because sometimes as we're coming on and off, we are creating some mechanical stress when we're not mowing. So it becomes a smarter move. And then Paspalum has, especially in the fall and the spring, it has a lot of disease pressure. So if we're trying not to be creating mechanical stress between that interface between the green and the collar, we're moving the roller out a little further. We're also taking care of dollar spot. So these are all things that and they make sense. People understand it. It's just it's a cool thing, and we continue to learn. Today I listened to a podcast or from Micah Woods, who's the Asian Turf Center. I hope Dr. Micah Woods. But anyway, he puts a lot of information out there, and I haven't done a soil sample in 7 years because I'm I would consider myself a soil scientist, but I don't get paid for what's going on in there, and I've never done a good enough job fixing that. But if I keep my moisture right and I keep my firmness correct, then I can look at clipping yield, and I know that I need some inputs to either slow it down or to move it up. And we're trying. The greatest thing I ever learned was who's your famous greenskeeper at Royal Melbourne? Claude
Crawford. Was it Crawford?
Claude Crawford, right?
Yeah,
so
Crawford, yeah.
I get to meet a childhood idol, Ben Crenshaw, and he's the designer of this course that I'm doing. And he says, John, this is like the first time I meet him. We're standing in the dirt and we're looking down one fairway, and he said, Royal Melbourne's my favorite place to play golf. And he said that the difference between, or Claude told him that the difference between the Australian greenskeeper and the American superintendent is the Australian greenskeeper is trying to stop the grass from growing, and the American's always trying to grow grass. And it didn't mean a whole lot to me when Ben said it, but you knew it was something special to hear that. And then now I don't say it exactly like Mr. Crawford said it, but if somebody says, well, I can grow grass, and I just nicely say, you know what, grass grows itself. We probably do more to screw it up. And that's my goal now, is to to take a little bit of that ego out, trust the numbers, and move on. But to go back to what I was starting to say was Michael Woods was talking about, maybe looking at our clip volume, because that's something we do keep records on, and your organic matter in the first 2 centimeters, and seeing, what grew in your soil versus what grew in your buckets. And these are interesting things. And these are the types of things that make sense to me now, as opposed to, this looks almost dead and it rolls great, and I'm the best superintendent I've ever been. That's the kind of thing that's the generation that I came from. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different approach now.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just touch back on what you're saying there around your moisture uniformity. And I know you put out a tweet a little while ago, and I think at Turf Monkey Boy, if anybody hasn't following you on Twitter, there's some great stuff.
You better be following me.
Yeah, exactly right. 6,000 people are, so we got to get that number up a little bit higher as well. But you were talking about the moisture uniformity. You just touched on it there before around moisture uniformity equates then to your firmness and otherwise. And you also in the tweet touched on how you're using rolling to manage that moisture uniformity. Can you just touch on that for us?
Yes, that was it. I mean, I didn't know you get the numbers, but then you got to know how to get them there, right? So I could run a machine, and like I said, I know that people use different nomenclature for mowing, but we were mowing like in places where you weren't supposed to be mowing anything. Machines weren't even built for that, and we weren't getting where we needed to go. So the whole thing, even though the first box we check now is plant health, which we define through, uniformity of moisture, more than anything else, and then uniformity of firmness. And the only way to do that, and that if I heard anything Dr. Nikolai was saying that day, was that your biology is better because your moisture uniformity is better when you roll. Yep. And then, I became very into this whole thing. And then, now it's down to we use your roller, which, it does a better job on the firmness side. It's not giant. The footprint's different. Ergonomically, it's so much better for the end user operator to get around the golf course. And it does a lot less mechanical stress on the ons and offs, the slippage, the maintenance of it all. So I knew what I needed to do, but I didn't know how to get there until I started to roll. And I mean, we would roll, come back on the same check. And, so some of it was arduous and painstaking, and people would be looking at me, and maybe turning around and rolling their eyes. But over time, we got it worked out. And if I had golf's a game, and it's a game that's played at certain times of the day. You only have sunlight at certain times. So if I had my druthers, I would always roll first thing in the morning and then dry mow if I could. But that doesn't necessarily happen. But what it does do is we pre-roll, which people don't even, I don't think about. Yeah. And be able to do that and to get back around and come back and post-roll. I was working with a PGA guy at a course in Mexico, and, they had a tour event there, and he's like, pre-roll, what's that? So, but it takes the moisture off, so it almost gives you that dry mow vibe. And if you go back to Paspalum and the density and the erratic nature of the growth, basically you got a lot of leaf competing to get some sunlight, so it's growing in all kinds of different directions. People say, well, it doesn't have any grain. The running joke here is with my pro and the members is they try to bring their buddies in, and they know that I get upset when someone says these are really good Paspalum greens, or these are the best Paspalum green, because I don't understand that. Like, why wouldn't you and nobody says this is the nicest Tiff Eagle green. They just say these greens are great, this is the best whatever green. So for whatever reason, people will always give you that little jab in my mind, because I'm a superintendent. Everything's a jab, not that they don't care. But so this summer, what's his name? He went to the Live Tour, Irish guy. Graham McDowell came.
Graham McDowell, yep.
Yeah, so they pulled him over and he made a little video and they sent it to me. He's like, "These are the nicest Paspalum greens ever," and they know that kind of gets under my skin, but it's become sort of a badge of courage that we can use the roller not only to know that uniformly we're underneath. And the other thing was I got a chance to do a lot of grow ins, a lot of renovations, and I came from that generation that didn't want to water. We were deep and infrequent. We didn't do all these things. And now I got all this salt in my water, and we have to be more wet than I would want to be. But the more I do the rolling and the more I understand that, and there's a guy who's a great superintendent close by here, who's had a world event, and he brought it up. He put it into words what I was seeing, which was, if you're building a tee or you're building a green, you don't build it dry, right? You can't get the shaping. You need to get it wet and you need to get it firmed up, and that's how you shape things. So I'm not as tied up with more than 18% moisture. It doesn't really matter, but whatever that number is, it's got to be over 90% uniform. And that's what we seek. And then, so if we're watering sometimes for dryness, but mainly to create a uniform surface. And it's not easy to do. And when you send it out, especially some of the tweets that I have, guys have the same tool that I use. They're like, there's no way you can do that, because there's movement in the greens. How do you have a slope that's exactly the same as, and they don't want to hear it. And you probably love to hear it. It's the roller. That's it. There's no magic in that. It's the roller, the ability to do it a certain way, to understand what you're trying to do below the surface. And that's as far as I go below the surface is the roller. And then with the pre-roll, obviously we can create a drier, better mow if we have to mow. So I don't know if I answered any of those questions.
Well, John, thank you very much for your time today and joining us on the Tru-Turf Super Series. It's been some great information to share, and I hope maybe we can touch base again in the future and have another session because it sounds like you're doing some really exciting stuff there at the Longboat Key Club, and we've scratched the surface, I think, today, and there's probably some other things we might be able to discuss in a longer session another time, but we certainly appreciate what you're doing, and the use of our product as well is great, and it sounds like it's having some really good outcomes for you there, and thank you again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Great, Super Nick, that's awesome. Good to meet you and good to talk to you.
Thanks, John.